probably the most exciting or most talked about trend in in broadband today is gigabit and the launch of gigabit services by service providers. And we have assembled a great panel of service providers who are in various stages of offering gigabit services. And I'd like to introduce the moderator of that panel now, who's Carol Wilson with Light Reading. Carol's really the dean of telecom journalism and covers this topic as well as many other, and will lead a great discussion on this. So Carol, please invite your panel.
I think as Jeff said earlier, what we're seeing is change is happening so fast. If I think about the way I as a journalist got to cover things, how much more relaxed the industry was when I started in 1985. Even then it was considered moving at a fast pace. It's nothing like what's happening today. Every so often I wish it would slow down, but the news business keeps me employed. I'm really happy to have this group of panelists. You're going to be hearing a lot from these guys, and I think that the great thing about it, we've all been hearing about gigabit networks. They're actually doing it. They're actually out there building these networks and delivering these services, and I think that's what's going to make this particular panel interesting. Approaching the stage right now is Jason Chan, the Market Development Manager from CenturyLink. And he has spearheaded the company's recent 1 gigabit consumer launch. He's going to be able to tell us about that. And let me make sure I've got these people lined up correctly. Okay, immediately to his, next to Jason is Cullen McCarty, who is Executive Vice President from Smithville Communications. And Smithville is located in Indiana. They recently turned up free gigabit connectivity for all their internet fiber residential customers. I think in March you did that.
Yes, promo.
Okay. And next to Jared is Randy, I apologize, Clint? Clint, I didn't do too badly. Who's General Manager of the Como Connect, which is part of the Como Electric Co-op, which is in central Missouri. And he headed up a 100-mile fiber to the home pilot, which led to the decision to run fiber to the home to all members of the co-op, correct? Okay, and then finally, last but certainly not least, we have Jared Baumann, who's manager of the market development and deployment for fiber at Spire. And Spire built a huge regional fiber optic network in Mississippi and is now connecting 10 cities with fiber to the home, I believe, and doing some very interesting things around partnering with the municipalities in the area they serve. So all these guys have a lot to bring to the table, and I'm going to stop talking and start asking questions. So my first question to them, and I think this is a fair question coming from a journalist, I think some of you might agree, we're hearing a lot of hype around gigabit networks. I know we write a ton about them, and there's a lot of froth around who's doing what where. But your companies are actually doing it, as I said. So can you briefly describe, and we're going to start the far end with Jared, and he warned me he's going to talk too much, so I'm going to keep you brief. Tell me briefly, describe your company's deployment and why you decided to jump into gigabit services.
So you started it a little bit, and that's Spire. We're the 6th largest wireless provider in the United States, mostly based in Mississippi, a little bit in Alabama, Tennessee, and Florida. But so we have this fiber infrastructure that's been built for all of our cell phone towers around the state of Mississippi. And we were already providing a lot of enterprise services off of that fiber network. Been doing that for a long time. In fact, that's how I came to Spire, as I was an enterprise customer for many years on the fiber side of the house. And so we decided that it was time for us to start utilizing that network for the residential side. And there was no more exciting way to do that than to go gig to the home. And when you have a fiber infrastructure there, why would you do anything else? You know, to me, there was no way that we were going to do anything other than gig to the home. And so when we were going to do this, we were going to do it right.
Okay, fair enough. All right, Randy.
Well, we, a little background on our network is that we are, first of all, electric cooperative who had fiber communications for substations and SCADA type, but our members were very unserved. So we decided to build out an all fiber to the home network, and gigabit for us as a way to differentiate our product offering. And as you know, when you're 13 customers per square mile, density is a challenge. But we're fortunate we have a recreational area where we have very high densities, but comes with that is competition. So for us, launching gigabit was a way to pull customers out of that competitive area to help subsidize the 13 customers per square mile. So, it's interesting that we've taken people straight from dial-up all the way to gigabit in one step. No incremental upgrades, no 256K DSL or 512K DSL. It's straight from 56K to 1,000 megabits. So
Wow.
it's been.
Anybody get whiplash?
What's that?
Anybody get whiplash? That's pretty dramatic.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and there are a lot of unserved areas, but when you're just like you said, when you're building fiber to the home, why would you offer anything less than a gigabit when the network's capable of it?
That makes sense. Okay, Colin.
Well, as a traditional telco, if you will, transitioning into a media broadband company, we are the largest of the rural independents in Indiana. It was a natural progression for us. We had invested in a fiber network back in 2000, and as a way to introduce DSL, roll that out, we acquired a majority share of an ISP in Bloomington, our neighboring community. And over time, DSL became, it became too slow. We figured that the best way to future-proof the network was to put fiber to the home. And so in 2008, we began our project with a loan from RUS through the traditional telecom loan program. And we've so far invested over $100 million in over 2,500 miles of fiber, 15,000 homes are on net, and we're not done. We still have about 4,000 or 5,000 homes to go. But given the changes in the rules with the FCC and recovery, that we've had to scale that down a little bit and be more strategic in terms of what areas to hit next. But it's really about future-proofing that network. And when we turned up our customers in March to a gig, it was to see what the results were. And the results were good. Some people noticed. The early adopters surely noticed. But a few people, it was just, it's a little faster, but the home can only get 100 meg perhaps out of a router. So we have some issues to work with there, but we're looking at what we can do with more gigabit over time and push that out even further. Because we are not only rural, but we have a lot of suburban areas, and that's where the bulk of that 15,000 penetration is. Our competition is Comcast, Bright House, New Wave. So we have 3 cable providers to compete against. We're right next door to a Big Ten research university in Indiana. We're also next door to a major naval research institution, or base. It's a base. It's a naval base in Indiana. It's hard to in the middle of Indiana. But a lot of the R&D that comes through the military comes from this base. So they have a lot of engineers who work with the contractors, and on base they demand high bandwidth. So we're in a comfortable spot, but it's very competitive right now.
Okay, we're going to come back a little bit to the competition a little bit later, but
Sure.
Jason, so you're in a little bit different position than these folks. Century has a lot of different markets.
Absolutely.
Tell us where are you doing gigabit?
We've got 16 cities. So Omaha and Las Vegas were our first test beds.
Okay.
We've since announced 16 more cities. So adding, the likes of Seattle, Denver, et cetera. So it's been very exciting for us, and it's actually an anniversary for us. A lot of people don't realize, you mentioned fiber to the press release.
Right.
We actually started this presentation to our CEO 2 years ago, talking about us wanting to do fiber. So when you see it in the press release, a month ago, et cetera, that discussion happened years ago. Now the question for us is why? When we were looking at broadband utilization, the average at that point, we had noticed 2 years, and this was going 4 years back. In that 2-year period, broadband utilization went up 120%. So if you were using, as round numbers, let's say you're using 10 gigabytes in a home, all of a sudden you're using 22. So for us, from a network planning perspective, we say what's going on. Obviously there's streaming, people are more users in the households, more devices. And funny or not, I actually like to attribute kind of like the iPad, the iPhone. Why? The iPhone 7 years ago got launched, iPad 4 years ago got launched. When you couple those, now a lot of us has iPads, iPhones, all those devices, you probably have a smart TV, and all these things are just data hungry. So when we looked at our network, we said, do we go ahead, at that point our fastest was an 80 meg bonded VDSL solution. plenty fast for the market, but we said, much like you said about future-proofing the market, we said let's spend a little bit more money, let's see if we can get the penetration and really keep a customer for much longer. That's really helped us with the churn.
Okay, so you're doing this, everywhere you got gigabit, you're pushing fiber to the home?
Absolutely.
Okay, and are you able to do it beyond the cities that you serve? Have you been able to do it in any suburban or rural communities?
So far, we've started where we want to get fiber to the market as quickly as possible.
Right.
Because fiber to the press release doesn't help anybody.
Right.
And so, where we had aerial footprint or conduit is obviously where we want to deploy fastest. As we continue to hit our business case numbers, we anticipate we'll continue to roll that market out. But in these particular cities, we happen to have either good network, the cities also partnered with us in a positive way, as well as positive reception. And that's kind of a difference between Google versus us. I've got an embedded base of 5 million people. I know exactly who's using the most broadband. I know who needs it. I know the billing history behind that. So when I'm deploying network, I've actually, although really my background's sales and marketing, I've become a map maker. I'm looking at demographics, I'm looking at mapping, trying to figure out where in these markets, one, they need it, two, when I give a presentation on gigabit, that they know that their iPads, iPhones, et cetera, use it. I don't know if any of you guys, this might be something I just do and you're telecom people, so you might do it too, but you check your speed test when you're walking around here. Verizon in this room's got 20 meg down, I think 8 meg up. Sprint's got 12 meg down, 5 meg up. And Jeff just spoke about the average in the US for a home connection, somewhere between 6 and 10 meg. So when in your pocket you've got the power to do these sort of speeds, at your home you definitely through a wired connection should be able to go up. And that's why we made the commitment so far to go ahead and go to 16 cities at this point.
Okay, so our next question is all around the business case, because I think the crucial thing here is how do you build the business case, and particularly in an area where most of these folks come from have densities much more like what Randy was talking about, 13 people per square mile, sometimes much less than that. So I mean, when you look at the business case, and Jason, I'm going to let you talk about that just briefly, and then we're going to move on. When you look at the business case, because you said you can measure usage, you know where this stuff is needed. How far off do you think CenturyLink is from being able to push it out into some of those more rural areas where that business case is going to be tougher?
It's always time and money, obviously. And the thing that's helping future business cases is after going through these test cities, we're noticing the ARPUs are higher. Much like Jeff talked about with Windstream, we've got the full scale of communications products. So once we have that 1 gigabit broadband connection, it doesn't end at just the internet connection. Now I want to sell you on managed services, cloud, security, home security as well. And all of a sudden the ARPU for each one of these users just explodes. It's exponential growth, so that whatever value you had on a customer beforehand in an earlier business case, all of a sudden the numbers start getting much prettier, even if you don't have necessarily the density. As long as you have the penetration within that community, it still will work out in a business case.
Can you give us any numbers?
I can't. My stock people are in the room, and I'm sure there's other couple of handlers that'll keep me from saying. So you'll hear me say X a lot.
So that click we heard was them loading their guns, right? Okay, all right. So Cullen, when you guys looked at that, you talked a little bit about this already, but when you talk about densities and trying to get places and make a business case for this, you feel like you had to do it, but are you actually able to make money doing it?
That's the challenge. And as an ILEC, you have to look beyond your territory, if you will, and making money at it.
So Smithville already you have Smithville Telecom, which is a competitive carrier, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So tell us about how that helps build the business case for what you're doing at Smithville within communications.
Well, one way to look at it is one helps to subsidize the other because of lack of traditional carrier-based subsidies we have in the industry.
Okay.
So we look at what telecom does in markets that are in price cap areas on the enterprise side in particular. We haven't done residential yet.
Okay.
But it's enterprise, SMB. We look at the revenue from that, and we look to put some of that money back into growing the traditional ILEC sector. So that's that business case. And then when you get further out, you've got, again, given the nature of where we are, people like to live out in a rural area. They're not far from Bloomington or Indianapolis. We have a new interstate coming in between within the next few years that will connect those two cities. So you're going to see a gateway that will allow people from Indianapolis to come back to Bloomington and so on and so forth. What I'm getting to is we serve a lot of those areas where alumni Indiana University want to come back to. Lake Monroe, some of those areas that Hoosier National Forest, it's a beautiful country, but they want urban amenities. So, as Jason was pointing out, you've got all these devices in the home. Now you're going to have 4K TV coming out in a few years, and then 8K we know is going to be rolled out in the 20 Olympics. So those are really hungry for bandwidth, and that's where we're going to try to see the business case there, is whatever we can pull down that pipe, whether it's that more bandwidth for media, including gaming, or security, managed services for the home-based business, or what have you. That's for us part of the business case. Whether it comes true, that's yet to be seen. But really, rural folks in our territory, if you will, especially around Bloomington, they like those urban amenities, and hopefully we can get them
They
to
like
buy
them, are
more.
they willing to pay for them?
Da-da. Yes, they are. To a point they are.
Okay.
To a point they are, so far. But we have to, we have to keep pushing as well.
Okay. All right, so Randy, you already talked a little bit about this, how you're able to subsidize the less densely populated areas, or what you can do in the more resort. What's the area you're talking about, the resort area you're talking
Like
about?
the Ozarks.
Oh, okay, okay. So tell us a little bit more about that, and how you monetize those less densely populated areas.
Well, we look at several things for leveraging not just our service territory for density, and in that area, which is a pretty high-end area also, our ARPU is very high. So that also helps subsidize the more.
Is that year-round ARPU?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm. Right. It's becoming more of a year-round destination, and a retirement community. As a rural electric cooperative, obviously one of the first things we looked at when we built the network was smart grid purposes. So, and as an electric cooperative, we don't have the returns on investment requirement that a for-profit or a publicly traded company would have.
Okay.
So we'll tolerate a much lower, a 6, 8, 10% return over a very long period. We're used to dealing with 20-year assets or 30-year assets, so that doesn't bother us. So another thing that's interesting is, we're 96% aerial plant, so that obviously is less expensive, and it's also less expensive to build in less dense areas. Very dense areas, very expensive to build in, more fiber counts, more splices,
Right.
more taps, things like that. So
you don't have Jason's investors breathing down your neck?
no,
Okay.
You're so lucky.
we have members breathing down our neck. So it's.
But are your members more concerned with getting the connectivity, or more concerned with making sure it's profitable?
They obviously want it to be the carry itself. So
Okay.
that was one of our first criteria when we started the project, is that it had to be a financial model that sustained itself without subsidization from the electric side of the business. So,
But you can amortize those things over a 20-year period?
right,
Okay.
the fiber plant itself.
Okay.
So what I was getting to on it's less costly, plus our take rates are much higher. So if I was in a city environment with a cable company and a CenturyLink DSL, for example, I would probably not expect much more than a 25 to 30% take rate in a competitive environment. But whenever we launch these new unserved areas, it's not uncommon for us to hit 40% penetration levels within 2 weeks of sending the mailing.
Wow.
So higher penetration, less cost because it's not as dense, and being able to use the subsidization from the dense areas to the sparse areas. The higher take rate and the higher ARPU for us, because we're full triple play also.
Okay.
So it is definitely a profitable model, and it won't take as much time as you think to get to there.
Okay. So I know Spire has a little different model. I kind of saved you for last there. But tell us what you guys are doing and how you're doing, because you're going into some.
I was thinking, as all these guys were answering, we have a little bit of a mix of all the things they're talking about.
Okay.
Really. Our business case, obviously this is the more difficult piece. Like you said, 2 years of discussion before you actually ever have a press release. And ours went a little faster than that. But I will say that, that was obviously a very difficult part of this. I'm sure everyone in the room has struggled with how do you make the business case for this. Spire, as a rule, does not accept government funding for any of its build out in this kind of with this kind of deployment.
Okay.
And so we don't take any government funding.
So you never
for these
went for
things.
stimulus money or anything like that?
We did not.
Okay.
In fact, our our owners of our company. We are a privately held company. Our owners of our company are very adamant about not using stimulus money.
Okay.
So so we have the private held sort of side of not having to worry about investors. And so we can look at things a little differently than what a CenturyLink can. But we're also not necessarily going for the real rural areas either right now.
Okay.
We really cover that with our wireless side of the house, and we'll continue to probably provide that more through our wireless side of the house. And we do a very good job throughout the state of Mississippi, wireless-wise, to provide good coverage data-wise. But really in the fiber to the home markets, we're really mostly looking at communities that we have fiber assets already in. And those vary greatly. So we really pick cities all the way from the very northern tip of the state all the way to the southern part of the state. And they're, two of them are college towns, typical of what you might think of a college town, sort of progressive, decent-sized towns, places that you might typically think of these kind of deployments being put in. And then we have a mix of very small rural Mississippi towns as well. And it's one of the things that I really like to tell the story about is one of actually our smallest town that we decided to deploy in, Quitman, Mississippi. Very, very rural.
So it got like 3,000 people or something like that?
Yeah, about 3,000 people. There's 1,200 homes in that town.
But a very energetic mayor, I understand.
He is very, very energetic, and we'll probably talk a good deal about those partnerships and how important that is.
Right.
But in that 1,200 person town, we've had about 1,200 home town. We've had about 650 of those homes sign up for the service.
Now you guys are taking kind of a fiberhood approach, like Google, right? A little bit?
Yes. So we really started out with sort of a Google-esque approach. Used a lot of their basis, certainly some differences in the way we did them, but we used a lot of their basis for making the case. So as we went to go make the financial models work, I like to think that I came up with a lot of the ideas on how we were going to do this as a company and stuff, but really a lot of it,
you Googled it, right?
Well, and I will say, even before Google did this, our company has done fiber to the home for many years in other small communities around the state.
Oh, okay.
We didn't do gigabit, and we didn't do towns that generally were competitively challenging. So they were areas that were very underserved, where you can generally get these good
You can get that 40, 50% penetration
pretty easily.
Right.
Where C-Spire changed and where we made our big announcements and things is where we were competing directly with your Comcast and your AT&Ts of the world. And so you had to do things a little differently. And that's where we talked about, and a couple of these guys have talked about, that's where you had to do gig. You had to be different. You didn't want to have all these different plans and options. And no offense to CenturyLink here at the table. But the traditional model is to have a lot of options. And generally speaking, our competitors that we run up against, it's confusing as heck to customers as to what they're actually getting and what they're going to pay for. When I moved into the Jackson Mississippi metro area a few years ago, I was paying one rate for my internet the first 3 months. The next 3 months I was at a different cost structure, and then the next 3 months I was at a different cost structure. By the end of the year, I was paying like 4 times what I started at. And had I probably read all the fine print, it probably told me all those things. We just don't believe in that kind of model. And I think customers find that kind of thing very, very annoying as a whole. But we had to go and be very competitive in these markets. And so we wanted to do something different. We'll get into the partnership side whenever you're ready.
Okay, well, I want to talk about that. I'm going to kick it off with you, but public-private partnerships, because Jason, you even talked about it. And when you talk about cities, being favorable, to me, that the bells that go off in my head is, free rights away. But I know that those partnerships are different and for different companies. So Jared, why don't you kick it off, because you guys have a different model. Try to keep it as short as you can, but tell us about the model, because it is different.
Well, so we started really, like I said, at the Google model, where we really looked at, the right-of-ways and the permitting times and those kinds of things. And those are very important to us. In fact, those are a requirement to any city or any county that we're going to work with. We're going to require those kinds of things, the same kinds of things that Google required.
Right.
We've made a commitment. We've done this now. We actually have more than 10 towns that have signed our agreements, just 10 that have been announced. We've made a
So what does that agreement amount to? What, are they different for each of the 10, or are they pretty standard, and what do you ask them to
Well,
provide?
actually, that's where I was going. So
Okay.
we've made a commitment, actually, to our first mayor that we signed this with, that we were not going to make it substantially different to the other towns. He sat across the table from me and said, hey, look,
Okay.
I'm going to sign this deal, and this is way different than I've normally done. But I want to know that you're not going to go and sign substantially different deals with the next mayor and the next mayor and the next mayor.
Okay.
And we've stuck to that. And there's slight differences depending on, little legal things that they want to cover in certain cities. But as a whole, almost identical agreements. Generally speaking, 15-day turnaround on a permit, and that's if they have problems with the permit. Otherwise, it's 5 days.
Okay.
Free right away, and it becomes the ordinance. So our franchise agreement supersedes all other town ordinances. And so those are some of the big challenges. Some cities don't like that.
Right.
We don't deal with those cities. We
Okay.
deal with the cities that want to have gigabit infrastructure and understand what it takes. And there's a lot of cities that have lined up waiting to work with us right now to do that. So that's essentially our franchise side.
Okay.
That's what I call, when I sit down and meet with these cities, I say that's the easy part. Now, some cities think that's the hard part, but I say if you think that's the hard part, then I'm not talking to the right people. That's the easy part. The part that's important to us is a direct partnership with these cities. We spend the money, we do the work when it comes to putting it in the ground. We're not asking for anything from the cities that way. But what we do is we expect them, and I say expect, we really truly expect them to be full partners on this. They become the marketing arm of our company. It is a true grassroots, and I'm talking door-to-door campaigns, I'm talking events, I'm talking anytime the mayor speaks anywhere.
So
anytime
this
they're
Mayor
doing
Whitman's kind of like your poster child for city cooperation then, huh?
Yeah,
Okay.
the mayor, it's Eddie Fulton in Quitman, Mississippi. He's one of them, and there's actually several of our mayors have been excellent.
Okay.
They've had different ways that they've all gone about it. Each of them have had different challenges in their town and different ways they've known to get it done. The mayor in Starkville, Mississippi, where Mississippi State University is, he's taken a completely different approach than Quitman, Mississippi has, yet he's been just as successful in his town in getting people to sign up there.
Okay, so I'll throw it out whoever wants to go next, but the kind of model he's talking about, are any of you doing similar things? And what are you seeing in terms of this? Because we hear that municipalities desperately want gigabit, they're willing to build it themselves and fund it with bonds in some case, but what are you guys seeing when you try to work with cities? Jason, you want to?
Yeah, well, let's go. Okay, no problem. So when you think about the 16 cities, when we looked at our full footprint, we're in, I believe, 58 markets, 38 states. And, we met with all of our local contacts and said, who's got the relationships with the politicians, local entities to make sure we can build this fast? And as we started looking at the list, when you look at the 16, that means for sure that we had a good working relationship. And what that points to is the fact that you've got history with these people beforehand, that there's already a relationship, so that when you say I've got something new, that you're not having to say, hi, my name's Jason, I know we've never met, but hey, I've got this new thing, and I'm also requesting expedited permitting, et cetera.
So what are the things that you expect those cities to deliver?
City by city, it kind of, it changes a little bit, but generally it's the expedited permitting, it's the rights of ways, easements, any sort of help we need from that perspective. But more importantly is what he touched upon is the support that, at our press release when we officially had launched it in Las Vegas, the governor was there. And we had the mayor coin the term Sin City to Gig City. And you cannot write, we couldn't write, that headline for ourselves. And, when we explain it to them, I said it's a gigabit, 100 times faster than a residential connection. Most people don't know what it is. But when you say you can do 333 streams of Netflix with it, they say that's that's cool. And they can't wait to tell the other mayors when they go to a conference, hey, Las Vegas has it, some other city doesn't. And it's been bragging rights for them. So we help them, we give those pitch lines so that they can go egg on the other mayors. And it almost creates this, it's a fun rivalry in which all the cities, inevitably, you want the broadband, we want to provide it. How can we make this a partnership to make it happen?
Okay, so what do they require of you in the back end? They want to see a commitment, you're going to go to this percentage of homes here, you're not going to redline, you're not, what do they do, what do they
So
expect
no
of you?
redlining for sure. So like in Las Vegas, I'm based in Las Vegas, so I'll speak very Las Vegas centric.
I wouldn't have guessed you as a Las Vegas type at all.
I'm impressed you guys all wake up this morning. We have a lot of distractions in town. Try living here. But yeah, actually go ahead and repeat your question, make sure I'm thinking about Las Vegas
What do
now.
they expect for you on the back end? I mentioned redlining is one thing, but what are the things that those cities are expecting you to promise to do?
Let me start this with setting expectations.
Okay.
That, when we go into those conversations, it's not necessarily authoritatively, but we want to speak from a perspective. We know what we're talking about. This is how we're rolling out. And I also have the benefit of having, now that we've used Las Vegas and Omaha as test cities, when we go into a Denver or something else, I can say this is how we've done it in Las Vegas. This was successful. Trust us as a partner. Look at our financial strength. Look at our customer strength. I'm providing services not only for 5 million residential customers, but U.S. The government contracts we talked about and all of that. And when you put that, when you have the whole story there together, it's a likely end result that you definitely want to partner with us. And the other half is you don't want to miss the boat. That if Las Vegas saw the opportunity, Omaha saw the opportunity, Denver, Seattle, et cetera, whatever, if there's another city we chose to go into, 16 people, or 16 cities had the foresight that this was a product that you want to be a part of. It's something you should at least be considering.
Okay, but coming back to what they expect of you, what do they then require you to do in order to give you the things
And
that
if you
you're
notice how I keep phrasing it, I keep setting the expectation of, and obviously it comes down to a negotiation of tit for tat, which way it'll go.
Okay. But are they saying we want you to cover this percentage of the city, we want you to cover these areas, we want to make sure we've got our hospitals and schools covered? What are the kinds of things they're asking you? You don't want, obviously you don't want me to pin down, I respect that. Well, kind of. Anyway,
Yeah.
But what are some of the things that you hear that they're asking for?
So those are, Google kind of set the standard for that,
Okay.
when they lit up libraries and schools, et cetera. However, they also asked for, space in the city halls and, permitters,
And
right
power.
next to them.
They got some free power too.
Yeah, and these sort of, and we don't need office space and these sort of things. So if someone happened to be privy to the Google documents, we very quickly are able to say, yes, they asked for, they gave a lot, but they also asked for a lot. And for us, we're not needing all of those things. We're trying to make Las Vegas a gig city. We're going to try to make it as fast as possible. The residents are going to love it. You're going to look like a hero. Don't you want to be a part of it?
Okay.
Yes. I mean, the answer is yes, time and time again.
Okay, Colin or Randy, either one of you want to talk about how you've worked with the municipalities, or have you done partnering with the municipalities?
We've done partnering, and we had one community that actually built their own conduit through downtown as an economic development piece. Because,
And then gave you access to that?
well, it was up for bid, and we won the bid. We won the RFP.
Oh, okay.
To populate that conduit. But they saw it as an economic development tool, so they were willing to work with us in any number of ways on business. And we, to help get in the door, if you will, we offered to give them a percentage back. So they've got some revenue, but they can get a more solid return other than the economic development piece. They were losing site selectors in this community, which is heavily reliant on manufacturing. And
The manufacturers were bypassing their community and going elsewhere?
they would go to see the community, and as soon as they got in the car to the airport with the Lido official, if you will, then they would ask about telecom infrastructure, and that official would
Okay.
say, this is what we have, and they'd say, turn the car around, we're going back to Indianapolis. So they wouldn't even make it to the city. And so that's where we started in that process. Ever since, that was 7 years ago when we won that bid. Ever since, we've had a terrific relationship with the city, and
Which city is this?
this is Columbus.
Columbus, okay.
Columbus. They have a little company there that manufactures some diesel engines, and it's not Caterpillar. But anyway, they are Cummins was a major player, and
Okay.
they really helped determine that they need that infrastructure. So we're now in talks about possibly doing residential because we have a saturation of network and customers in the business side in downtown. But they're coming to us. They're offering us certain things that we're taking a look at.
Incentives. Okay.
And so we're always willing to partner as long as there's obviously a mutual benefit. But that's a very progressive city in their approach. When they overbuilt that conduit and they opened it up for bid, and we've tried to encourage other cities to take a look at that as well, if they don't want to go into doing it their own. And we're also talking to another town that has their own municipal power company.
Okay.
So access, obviously, pole attachments are a major major issue, and rights of way, everything comes into play. I mean, I think we all hit the same thing, that if you want us to come here, here's what's going to have to happen. You're just going to have to help us expedite the process and streamline your own process and your efficiencies to get us in here to make it happen.
Okay, so Randy, is the electric co-op, you guys have a little different situation or not?
Yeah, we do, but we do have one specific city within our service territory. In Missouri, electric cooperatives typically don't serve inside communities of over 1,500 people.
Okay.
So we don't typically deal with that on our electric side, but on our telecom side, we did realize that we call them donut holes inside of our 2,300 square mile service territory of small, either municipals or investor-owned utility served communities. But what we realized really quickly is, those are so integrally tied to our region and our communities that we didn't want to leave them out. It was going to be the flip-flop of what's traditionally happened, is that everybody in the rural area was going to have gigabit and the people in the towns were only going to have DSL. So we did make a determination early on that we were going to serve those cities as we serve our members. So we did reach out. The first city, and city is relative term, it's 4,000 people, but they were a municipally owned power system. They had an abandoned cable plant. We have 3 or 4 cities inside of our service territory where the cable companies walked away.
Oh, wow.
So they left the liability on the poles for the municipal systems. So we negotiated with the cities to purchase that abandoned cable plant, which bought us a spot on the pole. So it virtually made our make ready zero.
That's awesome.
And
I assume they gave you a good price?
In the $1 to $5 range. So, it was a win-win. They got rid of a liability that's hanging there on their system. It's in the way of their power system, and we went in and we delashed the coax and relashed it with fiber, and now we've turned those in. And those goes back to our business case also. So we're leveraging density not just inside of our service territory, but we're pulling in additional revenue from our non-members in to help cover the cost. And of course, 50 customers per plant mile is a lot better than 8. So
Yeah, we do all burial on our fiber.
You all
So
buried?
I
All
keep
aerial?
All burial.
All
in the
burial.
ground.
They're all buried?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's obviously more expensive to build that way, but being in Mississippi and the damages and things that we had with Hurricane Katrina that came through.
You guys get everything now, hurricanes, tornadoes, it all comes through there.
It happens.
Yeah.
But we're just not going to put things in the air. It doesn't make sense for us to put things in the air. Customers expect higher reliability than that anyway.
Okay.
And when you have those kind of storms, I mean, even in the Jackson, Mississippi area, which is halfway up the state, we had massive, massive damage after Hurricane Katrina to all the infrastructure and things all the way that far north.
So that's totally changed the thinking of how you build a network in Mississippi.
Yes, so everything's going to be in the ground.
Okay, that makes sense. So at this point, have any of you had gigabit developments running long enough that you've begun to see an economic impact, whether it's a new business came to town or something else happened? And I mentioned this, there's a debate raging right now, and it really comes down to which side you fall on. The Fiber. The Home Council put out a report last week which says they're already seeing benefits of gigabit in those communities that have had it for a while in terms of economic development and actual, I think they were tracking GMP of those communities. We've also obviously had another group with a different political agenda come out and say even some of the most highly touted gigabit deployments, and I'm thinking about Electric Power Board in Chattanooga, has had no impact at all. And so it sort of seems like it depends on how you work the numbers a little bit, but since you guys are real world deployers, have you seen economic impact at this point, or is it too early to gauge that?
I think we're pretty early on our side. We are doing deployment now. We have customers on our service. We haven't done a big official customer launch announcement or anything, but we have customers on the
I'll be
service.
happy to do that for you here today.
Well, and what's interesting is, while I can't give you a number, I've seen that same report that you're talking about. What we can tell you is the neighborhoods that we're deploying fiber in, and some of these are in the metro area, Jackson metro area, in the Ridgeland town specifically, some very nice neighborhoods we're building in. And just one neighborhood, for example, is a neighborhood called Densmore, a nice upper middle class neighborhood. And it's generally there's a lot of turnover in that area because it's kind of businesses and things around. There's a lot of executives in and out and things. There's a lot of turnover. And so generally there's always a pretty good supply of houses that are available in this neighborhood. That has gone to almost zero since we've deployed fiber there because it's become one of the hot spots in the area for people to go to.
Interesting.
And so
Okay.
that's already been real exciting to us. Also in the little town of Quitman, Mississippi, they've already started to see some, and we can't talk about names specifically because they're economic development type deals that they're working on, but they've already had a couple businesses that have approached them that they would have never had consider the town if they weren't one of these gigabit towns.
Okay, fair enough. Anybody else?
Yeah, we've seen, I think it's too coincidental with Columbus especially. Cummins has invested a lot more in its downtown. The city has redeveloped its downtown in the time that we've been there, and I think they see the value that we have brought to that small city. And it is to headquarter such a large corporation as Cummins. It's a small city, and so they've taken over a lot of the downtown real estate, and we light it all. So we built out to this cornfield outside of the Crane Naval Base that is now a tech park, and that tech park houses at least 30 small businesses, but they're major defense contractors, mostly from the East Coast, who appreciate the bandwidth that they can't get on the East Coast. So we've seen the changes there. It's pulling in more engineers and more high-paying jobs. So we're seeing that benefit. We're seeing testing results in some of the schools where we provide gigabit are good.
Okay.
Graduation rates are increasing, and so I think you can point to those things.
You're keeping kids at home on their iPads as opposed to roaming the streets and getting into trouble, is that the-
Absolutely, they're
Okay.
helping to spend mom and dad's money or however, But yeah, I think those are kind of the soft results that are kind of hard to put hard figures to.
Yeah, I understand.
And I'd say it's early for us. It's,
Okay.
because as soon as I have that story that, X amount had been grown, you're going to see a press release from me. So the Fiber to the Home Council report looks good for us. There's another report about home values going up.
Right.
I love them. Sounds good to me.
Right.
But as far as definitive proof so far, as far as our actual numbers, our sales velocity in fiber-enabled footprints is 6 times faster. So you talked about with just a mailer, I think 40% within 2 weeks or something.
Okay.
And we're experiencing that same thing where if I launch VDSL in fiber, generally same population for demographics, the fiber neighborhood will just way outsell the fiber to the home. Same thing in business. So as a result of that in Las Vegas, we actually just launched, we started with a small trial. Now we're turning on 60,000 businesses in Vegas, all capable of up to a gig. And that's truly as a result of the success in the trial. People are adopting it, people are using it. We can't wait to find out how they're using it, and what are the next technologies that we'll be able to utilize that sort of connection.
Okay, so anybody else? Randy?
We
Sorry.
just have, it's pretty early for us too.
Okay.
Our oldest fiber to the home deployment's about 3 years old, but we launched gigabit back in March. But we do have a couple stories that tell. I have an email from a COO of a Fortune 100 company who has a vacation home that's on the fiber, and his email started out Zowie, and he said that his family thanked us because they could spend more time at their lake home because he could work from there.
He could work from
And
there, yeah.
He said that his internet's much faster at his vacation home than it is at his corporate headquarters in Kansas City. So we have things where we believe that we have about 10,000 passings that are seasonal or they're vacation homes, and we believe those people will spend additional days in those homes, buying groceries, buying gas, buying,
Right.
that will drive revenue growth for our community. But the other thing we've seen, which we did not expect, is when you're unserved, you may have your internet from a HughesNet or a Wild Blue or Exceed, which is not cheap. And
Right.
you have DirecTV, which is not cheap. And you have dial-up, and you have a phone line, and you're paying long distance. We've started to look and analyze the data that's coming in when we port numbers away from other carriers. We ask for the phone bill so that we can get all the information correct. But we start analyzing how much money we're saving everybody, and on average we're saving them $20 to $25 per month. So when we're fully deployed, that's $3.8 million of disposable income back into our community.
Interesting.
Which I think is a sizable number when you're talking about a rural area like that.
So they're paying less to get better service?
They're paying less for better service.
Wow, interesting, okay. All right, cool. All right, so I think we would all agree that it's going to be a while before there's some really solid numbers, and so this debate is likely to rage on. I think a lot of that relates to the fact that some of the folks who are trying to squash this a little bit are more afraid of muni networks than they are of what you guys are providing. But do you guys get caught up sometimes in the political aspects of this? I mean, are you running up against municipalities that are, and I guess this is probably most of you, who are saying we're going to build our own network unless you come build it for us?
So far, not to my knowledge. That's generally not where we're. And again, we rely on our past successes.
Okay.
That, of course, you could start from scratch and you can do it. It's, buying fiber, et cetera, laying it. You're able to do it. But we've been in business 83 years. I'm in 58 markets, 38 states. I do this for the government. I do this for big companies, et cetera. I do this for mom and pop shops. Now, if you want to go ahead and operate your own network, you're more than welcome to. But go ahead and choose a trusted provider.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to skip through a couple of things we talked about asking because I want to give the audience a chance if you guys have questions, and just get to one critical question, one question I think is critical, and that's what new services, and I think some of you have touched on this already, but what are some of the new services you're going to be able to provide, and are those revenues from these new services critical to the ongoing business case? So what kind of new services are you looking at beyond, and I say new services, I mean beyond voice, standard data, or not standard data, gig data, high-speed data, and a basic IPTV service or something like that?
So for the home, we've added on home security.
Okay.
So from here, from the power of my phone, I can lock my doors, turn on my lights, turn on my lights, fully automated, as well as the cameras. So that actually is not included in our business case.
Okay.
Going forward, it's a new product for us. So really IPTV still really is integrated in the business case.
Okay.
However, you haven't seen any marketing behind our home security product, still in trial at this point. But as we launch that further, I fully expect that instead of a triple play, we expect the quad play.
Okay.
And from the business side, obviously, now that we've taken over Savvis with our cloud services, AppFog for app development, and right now those are not fully integrated into business cases.
Okay.
But because it's just so new.
Right.
But as we start seeing, I spoke earlier about the higher ARPUs and the higher billing rates for business customers, that inevitably you've got to account for the fact that these are much more valuable customers now.
Okay.
And you may not have to get as many as you originally thought to still make the business case work.
Okay.
I could almost directly echo Jason's comment there. We've also announced that we're doing security and home automation and those things. And actually I could pull out and show you a demo right now of my house, and you can see my dogs running in the backyard and all that kind of thing. Or I could open my garage door for a contractor to come in, or whatever it may be. We are also not doing a lot of marketing around it. It's still we're still working through some of the billing issues and some of
Okay.
those things. I'm sure many of you are aware of.
I can always bill. I have no problem billing.
But we're looking at some additional things, but again, ours is not built into the business model either. That's just additional services on top of it. TV, phone are built into the business model. But really, fiber to the home, the business model works on its own.
What about, I know a lot of what the services we've talked about, and some of them we talked about here, things like telemedicine, distance learning. Are those things that I'm not saying necessarily part of your business model, but are those things that your companies are looking at and developing? Randy, you're nodding your head, so go ahead.
It's interesting because I'm going to visit a university next week who I've talked to that has a trial of a program where they're putting sensors in assisted living facilities or even in individual homes where an elderly person may be alone. And they actually built it off of the Xbox Connect sensor.
Okay.
And they're trialing in the homes in Kansas City because that's the only place that they could get enough bandwidth because of the amount of data that those sensors feed back into their database. But they've
It's like detecting movement and refrigerator door opening and things like
movement, and they actually can, they say, and I haven't seen it yet, with statistical significance, they can predict when someone's about to have a major life-changing event like a stroke or a major fall for like their bones are degenerating, and they've got the data to prove it.
Wow.
And so I'm going to get a demo of that, and they're looking for a trial inside of our territory because of our bandwidth, which would with our new retirement communities, would be a major benefit.
We have an advantage as well on this, being fiber and the kind of bandwidths and things you can push. So the school in Quitman, Mississippi, so I use Quitman as an example a lot. It's a rural town, and it's just a fun example. But they've got some very visionary leaders there. And what their school has done is they've actually worked with the University of Mississippi Medical Center, which does a lot of telemedicine in the state of Mississippi. And they actually have a program that they've started this year where now if a kid comes in sick, they have a school nurse that's there. They're actually directly connected through telemedicine back to the University of Mississippi Medical Center in Jackson to doctors, where they can actually evaluate and do an exam and then determine what needs to happen with the student. And they're doing that already, and that's on our fiber network. As well, a small county, or small population county in Mississippi, Franklin County in Mississippi, they have a small hospital, rural hospital there, and their emergency room is actually staffed by emergency room doctors in Jackson, Mississippi, through telemedicine. So most of the work is actually done by the nurses and skilled staff that is there, but it's not necessarily emergency room doctors that are staffing that emergency room full time. They actually staff it in Jackson, Mississippi, and do this all through telemedicine. And so that's all stuff that's actually happening today that is happening in Mississippi.
There's an ER joke in there somewhere, but I'm not going to go there. Anybody else got it?
We were all about telemedicine when we got into the enterprise gigabit service back in last decade. And the chatter we hear in the rural health industry is that there are some who do not want to use telemedicine because they can't get reimbursed.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And that's really disheartening.
The insurance companies won't, and Medicare, Medicaid, those things.
And they don't want to touch it.
Okay.
So, and that's really disappointing because some of the areas we serve, that could be literally a lifesaver because there are a number of systems that have access to great specialists in Indianapolis and or Terre Haute, and they don't have that access. That's a battle to fight. But going back to the retirement communities, the home is becoming, I think in these assisted living communities, they're looking at these homes becoming a big medical device. So to do diagnostics, that you can supply your own sample, if you will. And yeah, the data is going to be staggering in terms of what they can find out and the trends and the big data. So that's going to be pretty fascinating. And we're looking at we partner with a client who is a big assisted living REIT, if you will, and throughout central Indiana, and that's what they're looking at, I think, is to bring that kind of technology to their homes because they see that. They see that's where it's going, and hopefully that'll bring some of the cost of medical care down over time, but it's really fascinating. Yeah, it's happening.
Okay, Jason, anything you want to add?
I think they've said it well.
Okay, all right, good. All right, so we've got somebody who has a question. I like that. Okay, so go ahead, ask your question.
Yeah,
Why don't you introduce yourself first?
Okay, and the mic is hot. Michael Hain from Nittany Media. We operate in central Pennsylvania, rural parts there. This has been a very informative session. I really appreciate your thoughts here. I have one question, I think, for each of you. How do you do your billing? I mean, obviously, these gigabit residential pipes can't be full. Are you billing for the access to the pipe, or do you have caps on capacity, or maybe 95th percentile, anything like that?
We're just billing for access to the pipe and no limits on gig, which is different than our traditional network where, anything above 10 meg, we do a 250 gig limit, and below that, I believe it's 150 gig. But, when we looked at the gig consumer, these are people with a need for speed. They want to take down my network. They want to stream 300 computers as much as they can. They want to invite the neighborhood, and we said, bring it on. And so to be able to do that, we had to eliminate the data cap.
We're the same. The only caveat I have in there is in our terms and conditions, it basically says you're not going to do illegal, stupid stuff, and you're not going to run server farms. So that's basically our rules on it. And otherwise, it's open, and so you're just paying for the gig.
I was going to ask about the server farms. That's, even Google, I think, isn't allowing server farms.
We're the same.
Same?
Yep.
Okay. All right, does that answer your question?
You don't bill for bandwidth usage, it's just for the access to the pipe. And you're right, nobody's going to fill that gig pipe, not for a while anyway,
So far, no.
I think.
So far.
New
Yeah,
one.
let's not put that out there as a challenge, though. Okay, over here on the right, on this side?
Yes, my name is David Selzer from Falkenberg Capital, and I actually have 3 questions. One is, so the deployment, how do you think the deployment of these gigabit networks will impact the net neutrality discussions? 2 is a little bit more specific, is what kind of margins are you looking at in order to, achieve the right ROIC? And then one question specifically for Mr. Chan, which is, when will you be serving 233 South Birch Street, Denver, Colorado?
Denver, Colorado? After this meeting, we'll make a phone call. We'll see. So Denver is one of our target markets.
I can talk about net neutrality.
Go for it.
From my side.
I'll let you do that one. Enjoy.
So I feel very passionately about the net neutrality argument. I'm very much for open internet, and when we come up with challenges, things, everyone knows that Netflix is the bandwidth beast, right? And so our answer to that was, instead of worrying about how to fight Netflix, we just went and directly peered with Netflix. And so, and really that's, I think, the approach that we want to handle on that. I know some of the larger operators have taken different approaches on that. Really, I mean, that's how we took it. We literally just made sure we lit fiber directly to them. So that was our answer. We want it to be open.
I would agree. We want it to be open. I will tell you that obviously you guys realize that Netflix and those types of services do put a strain on our network. So far, we as a company have not done anything as far as limiting or providing easier access. But the struggle is real. And but to that end, when you pay for that, and my testament regarding the gig, saying that we're opening up, we know that you pay for that connection so that you can enjoy it, and everything we can do to be able to enable you to do that and serve you as a good business, since you're a customer, we're happy to support.
Yeah, as a small carrier, that's not really an issue for us. We've abided by those principles for a long time before they became, not quite codified, but the principles were put out there. So, yeah, we're not an issue for our company right now.
It's not an issue for us either. We run an open network and don't do any bandwidth restrictions, or of course we don't have the luxury of peering with Netflix because we're so far from a large metropolitan area, but it's, yeah, we believe in the open internet as well.
Okay. All right. All right, there's a couple minutes left. Anybody else have a question? If not, I'll give one last question to the
I don't
panel.
remember his second question. He had a second question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Talked about ROI and
Margins.
margins.
I should have just forgot
I was
that
going to keep moving on.
I should have just forgot that one.
Margins. Anybody want to talk margins?
What's that?
So obviously, our old legacy revenue with the phone lines is much higher margin, much higher revenue. And so we knew that we had to be able to replace that revenue as people got those lines. We'd have to sell, figuratively, 2 times as many data customers. And another reason, going back to our original statement on why did we get in the gig business, a lot of us were successful business people. Saving $5 a month is not going to get you to change service. 10 meg versus 20 meg, generally as long as you can check your email, go on Netflix, again, not a reason to switch. No matter how many mobile billboards, door knockers, et cetera, you're not going to switch. What we realized with this demographic especially is we needed a superior product, because if it was an experience you couldn't get from somebody else, it became almost an enviable aspirational product. And that's been another key part of our marketing strategy.
Okay. Okay, good. On that note, we're going to close, and please join me in thanking our panel.